Chicago's most likely going to trade out of the first overall pick, and Houston has the most draft capital to be able to slide up to number 1 and take Bryce Young. So I'm going to go Jalen Carter at 1, Bryce Young at 2. In reality, I think the order gets reversed, but Jalen Carter's the best defensive player in this class. I think he's a clear step above Will Anderson as a prospect. My biggest concern with Carter is pad level. When offensive linemen can establish underneath leverage, he becomes a lot less effective rushing the passer, but I think his length, quickness, and pass rushing skill set makes him worthy of a top 3 pick. And for the Texans, Bryce Young gives you an instant culture shift. I do have durability concerns because of his size, but outside of that, this is a no-brainer pick. At number 3, the Cardinals aren't going to go quarterback, obviously, so I'm going Will Anderson Jr. His 2021 tape was a lot more impressive to me than last year's, but he still had 65 pressures, 14 sacks, and I think he's in that Aiden Hutchinson tier of prospect where he might never be a top 5 pass rusher, but he's a really good all-around player. And then at 4 through 6, we have a run on quarterbacks with the Colts taking CJ Stroud, the Seahawks taking Will Levis, and the Lions taking Anthony Richardson. I really like the fit for all of these quarterback prospects because all 4 of these teams have offensive tackles that you feel pretty good about. Laramie Tunsil had an all-pro season, and Titus Howard is a really good right tackle. The Colts have Braden Smith and Bernard Raymond, who played really well down the stretch. The Seahawks got Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas in last year's draft class, and then the Lions have Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell. So with Bryce Young being undersized and someone that you don't want taking a lot of hits, CJ Stroud looked great in the playoff game, but for his entire career, he's really struggled under pressure. I feel like these are good situations for rookie quarterbacks where they can develop the way you want them to, and they have enough of a supporting cast that you can make a real evaluation on them. And then with Anthony Richardson, I think people are overselling how raw he is as a prospect. I don't think there's nearly as big of a gap as there was with someone like Malik Willis, for example, but the Lions do have Jared Goff, so if Anthony Richardson needs to sit for a while, you know you can get competent quarterback play until he's ready. At number 7, I have the Raiders taking Miles Murphy, edge rusher out of Clemson. Very similar to Trayvon Walker from last year. Freak athlete, but he doesn't really have a developed pass rushing skill set. But similar to the Jaguars, they already had Josh Allen, who is an established pass rusher, and they weren't needing immediate production from Trayvon Walker. That's the same situation with the Raiders. They have Max Crosby to be that number 1 pass rusher, and Miles Murphy can be the number 2 for the first few years as he develops. At 8, I have the Falcons taking Brian Bresee, defensive lineman out of Clemson. They need a plan for life after Grady Jarrett, and Brian Bresee is the clear defensive lineman 2 in this class. The Panthers were a difficult team to pick for at 9. They missed out on the top 4 quarterbacks, and I haven't watched enough of Tanner McKee to be comfortable taking him in the first round. So I'm going to go with Quentin Johnston, wide receiver out of TCU. He's not my wide receiver 1, but I like the way his skill set pairs with DJ Moore, and I'm definitely a little lower on Quentin Johnston than most people. He's 6'4", 215, but he was 8 for 23 in contested catch situations last year, and he had 8 drops. But this is a really weak receiver class, and you're just not going to be able to find his speed and size combination anywhere else. The Eagles somehow have the 10th overall pick, so I'm going to go with Tyree Wilson, edge rusher out of Texas Tech. He's going to have one of the longest wingspans of all time when he measures in at the combine. And with Tyree Wilson, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, Hassan Reddick, the Eagles are just collecting the most extreme variations of elite athletes along the defensive line. And I do have concerns about Tyree Wilson's short area quickness. You see him miss a lot of tackles in open space. And it wouldn't surprise me if an NFL team decides he needs to add weight and move inside. With Fletcher Cox at 32 years old, the Eagles are going to have a need at 3 technique. So they're going to be able to find a role for Tyree Wilson no matter what. The Titans missed the playoffs, but they're going to be able to find a replacement for Taylor Lewan with Paris Johnson Jr., offensive tackle out of Ohio State. He's the clear offensive tackle 1 in this class, in my opinion. He's a dominant run blocker in both zone and gap schemes. He can get to the second level under control and flatten linebackers, but he also creates a ton of displacement on down blocks and double teams. And he only allowed 2 sacks and 14 pressures in his junior season. He has elite foot quickness and recovery ability. He is somewhat vulnerable to the inside, but I think that's more of a technique issue than an athletic limitation. With Houston's 2nd pick, I'm going to go Jordan Addison, wide receiver out of USC. With Brandon Cooks probably on the way out, the Texans are going to need another weapon for Bryce Young. At 13, I have the Jets taking left tackle Broderick Jones out of Georgia. They're most likely going to be out of range for a quarterback in the draft, so they'll probably try to trade for someone or get someone in free agency. And Broderick Jones is a former 5-star, excellent power and length, but the reason he's the 2nd offensive tackle off the board is because of his stiffness and pass protection. He's kind of similar to Evan Neal from last year, where he ends up on the ground way too often for someone of his size. With pick 14, I have the Patriots taking Devin Witherspoon, cornerback out of Illinois. Witherspoon is one of my favorite players from this class. His tape from this past season is unreal. He led all college cornerbacks in PFF coverage grade. He only allowed 206 yards on 425 coverage snaps. He had a passer rating of 25.0 when targeted, and he had 14 pass breakups and 3 interceptions. And he's a perfect scheme fit for Bill Belichick's defense because he's such an elite press man corner, but he's also really explosive in off coverage. He makes a lot of instinctive plays in zone. So from a stacked cornerback class, I have Devin Witherspoon as my cornerback 1 just because of how complete his game is. At 15, the Packers are going Jackson Smith-Njigba, wide receiver out of Ohio State. Most of the receivers I'm taking in the first round, really outside of Jordan Addison, are going a little bit higher than I think their value would dictate. But even in a weak receiver class, the need for wide receivers around the NFL persists. I've got the Commanders taking guard Peter Skoronski at 16. I think you try him at left tackle just because of how polished his footwork is. He definitely has the skill set to play left tackle in the NFL, but 32-inch arms is just a huge barrier to overcome, and you see him struggling with length at the Big Ten level, and so it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up moving inside in the NFL. The Steelers need to upgrade at left tackle, so I'm going Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma. He has the ideal combination of size and quickness, 447 pass blocking snaps, only 1 sack, and 9 pressures allowed this past season. I had the Lions taking Anthony Richardson with their first pick, and at pick 18, they're going to address the other side of the ball with cornerback Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. Jeff Okudah started off strong, but his level of play has dipped over the second half of the year, and Christian Gonzalez is a dominant press corner, one of the best athletes in this class regardless of position. He had a rough game in week 1 against Georgia, but then really clean tape after that, and he kind of reminds me of Caleb Farley, but without the injury concerns. Continuing the run on corners, I've got the Bucs taking Joey Porter Jr. at pick 19. 6'2", 198 pounds, really good in press coverage. He had the best tape of anyone against Marvin Harrison Jr. this past season, and he had one of the best individual performances I've watched this year in week 1, where he had 5 pass breakups against Purdue. The Seahawks really need to improve their pass rush, so I'm going Nolan Smith, edge rusher out of Georgia. Just a relentless player, impossible to block, former #1 overall recruit, and they've gotten some flashes from guys like Darrell Taylor, but they really need to find consistency at that position. And then speaking of consistency, I've got the Jags taking Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame. Regardless of what they do with Evan Ingram, I think this would be a huge addition to the offense. Keep in mind, Evan Ingram only played 36.2% of his snaps from inline tight end, so he's really more of a slot receiver, and Michael Mayer is someone that can have his hand on the ground, be a really good run blocker, but then also give you that security blanket receiving threat over the middle of the field. The Giants are in a tough position at 22 because they desperately need to upgrade at receiver, and like I've said with a lot of these teams that need receivers, they're going to be forced to reach and take Josh Downs out of North Carolina. The biggest thing with Josh Downs is that he doesn't have a great catch radius, but he has been pretty effective in contested catch situations, and he's just really explosive and dynamic with the ball in his hands. At 23, I have the Ravens taking Cam Smith, cornerback out of South Carolina. These cornerback segments are kind of repetitive, but again, he's just a really good press corner, which the Ravens need as they're trying to rebuild their secondary. At 24, the Chargers are going to take Darnell Wright, right tackle out of Tennessee. I was blown away by his tape from this past season, especially against the best competition. You go and watch his reps against BJ Ojulari, Will Anderson. He's comfortable taking a lot of true pass sets, protecting the outside, but then he has the movement ability to recover and slide his feet inside as well. For the Cowboys, opposing offenses have been attacking cornerback 2 all season, so I'm going to take Jalen Jones out of Texas A&M to really solidify that spot across from Trayvon Diggs. And then with Deron Bland in the slot and a really good safety room, I think they're set in the secondary. The Bengals need a right tackle of the future, and I'm going to go with DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State. Probably going to have some of the longest arms in this class, but he uses his length really effectively, and that'll be a valuable position to have on a rookie contract with some big extensions coming up in the future. At 27, I have the Vikings taking Brian Branch, safety out of Alabama, and it says safety, but he's really more of a slot overhang defender, but he's one of the best and most aggressive tacklers in this class, and if the Vikings are going to play some variation of this soft zone, which I don't suggest that they do, but if they are, you need someone like Brian Branch in the underneath zones that can punish offenses for taking checkdowns. The Broncos need help at edge rusher. Baron Browning flashed at the beginning of the season, but he hasn't shown a lot since that Colts game. So I'm going to go Mike Morris out of Michigan. He still needs some time to develop, but he has the traits to be a dominant #1 edge rusher. At 29, the Bills are going to be forced to reach on receiver and take Rashee Rice out of SMU. Gabe Davis hasn't really taken that next step, and Rashee Rice has some of the best film of the available receivers. I do like the fit with Jalen Hyatt just because of how far Josh Allen can push the ball down the field, but I think this is too early for someone with that many question marks. George Karlaftis has had a nice rookie season for the Chiefs, but they still need a second edge rusher, so I'm going to go BJ Ojulari out of LSU. He's really just a speed rusher at this point, but he has a rare ability to bend his shoulder and dip around the edge. When it looks like he's about to get flushed out of the pocket, he's able to hit that second wind and really flatten his trajectory to the quarterback. So as with most edge rushers that you're taking in this range, he still needs to develop his pass rushing skill set, but he absolutely has first round traits. And then with the final pick in the first round, I've got the Eagles taking Keely Ringo, cornerback out of Georgia. I'm seeing Ringo in the top 10 of a lot of people's big boards, and to me, that just does not match up with the film. He has some nice highlight interceptions down the sideline, but if you watch him on a snap-to-snap basis, he's a really stiff player. He's constantly getting juked out in the open field, and he wasn't really able to take that next step and build on a promising 2021. Last year, he allowed 346 yards. This year, he allowed 552 on just 30 more coverage snaps, but I still think he has traits that are worth betting on in the first round. And with the talent that Philadelphia has defensively, I think they can afford to ease Keely Ringo into the lineup, kind of similar to the Kyer Elam situation in Buffalo from last year. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, let me know in the comments any NFL draft prospects that you'd like me to cover.